Serum 2 just dropped and I was playing around with it when I wrote what you're hearing in the background. In this video we're going to look at Serum 2 and I'm going to show you how I turned this idea into this. Oh, yeah, my mic stand broke. Get out of here. And whilst that will make filming this video more difficult, who cares? Serum 1 has been my default synth for years. I was surprised the other day when I saw that Serum 2 had been released. Needless to say, I grabbed it immediately. There's very little point in me explaining the synth or showing you its features. There's loads of other creators that can give you the technical breakdown way better than I ever could. But instead, what I want to do in this video is show you the process that I went through to create what you heard in the intro. I'll start by showing you the compositional side of things, and then how I enhanced those ideas with Serum and some other plugins. Timestamps below. So let's jump over to Ableton. I found this patch Imaginary Fears, and I just started fooling around until I came across this idea. To me, this idea is quirky enough to justify writing a song with it. When listening to this idea, there's two things that I think are important. The first is that it has two chords, being the A minor and the F major. The second is this little descending idea. So that means that we now have two elements that we can expand on or emphasize throughout our song. Final note on this one, I wanted the high notes to be a bit shinier than the low ones, so I doubled the higher notes up an octave. So instead of, we've got, and that's it for this instrument. It barely changes apart from this. The next thing I did was pick up my guitar and play around with ideas until I felt like I captured something cool. This was the result. Now in reality, landing on this idea took a lot of screwing around, but essentially once I was happy with the basic outline, I just played with it until I was satisfied. But as you can see, this idea is pretty similar to the synth melody. Now before we move on, I want to mention this little run at the end. That one came out pretty naturally. If I had have just repeated the initial idea over and over, it would have got exhausting really quickly. As an example, if we just repeat this riff, I think the riff's cool, but it's not cool enough to be repeated forever without any change. By the second time I heard it, I already feel like it's predictable. So instead of repeating this riff every single time it plays, it felt right to make it a complementary idea so that these two ideas can play off of each other. In this case, it made sense to have another melodic phrase, and as the chord that was being used at the time was the F major, it made sense to highlight those notes that I was playing. I hope that's clear. So at this point, we've got an intro and an idea of what the final riff sounds like. The good thing about this is the final riff idea was written to expand on the intro idea. So it's pretty easy to deconstruct this riff to connect the two together. So let's give a quick listen to the full song and you should pretty easily see how I connected the dots. I hope that you can see that all the stuff that happens over here is just a deconstruction of what happens here. The only thing that's different are these chords in here, which are just a little bit of extra spice for fun. The final thing to discuss here is the lead line. Poorly played though it may be, this idea is just playing the chords from earlier. When the song plays A minor, the guitar plays an A minor arpeggio. When the chords play F, you guessed it, the guitar follows. And aside from that, when that big F major run happens, the lead line follows. So that's all the compositional side. It's pretty straightforward. It's two chords, one melodic idea, emphasize and enhance. Now we're going to move over to Serum 2 and the other post-production elements to see how I emphasize and enhance these ideas tonally and energetically. Let's start with the drums. First idea is this. Groundbreaking stuff. Obviously the intention's to build to the riff. One way that I did this is by not using any cymbals here. This is absolutely intentional. It means that I can have impact by actually hitting the drums right now, but when I want to go bigger, I can start including the cymbals, which is exactly what I do over here. But in this part, the drums go kind of nuts. I want to have it that kind of leading to a climactic feel. So all I'm doing with the drums here is going nuts and letting it expand on what the guitar and bass is doing. Finally, here is the main groove. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Side note, when I'm writing drums for myself, I kind of do whatever I think sounds cool, but I try to keep it realistic. So I'm not hitting 4 drums at once because drummers can't do that. However, when I'm working with a drummer, I give them my ideas and let them take charge. In my experience, it's best to trust your drummer's opinion. Sometimes you'll need a discussion to connect your ideas more solidly, but my initial drum ideas rarely make it to the final recording. Now, I knew that I was going to have heavy synth use in this song, so why not enhance the acoustic drums with electronic drums? And this is very similar to if you're writing Argent metal. That's where I got the idea from. You have a main electric kick and snare that give you a huge kick on 1 and 3 and a massive snare on 2 and 4. Then you let the metal drums connect the rest of the band to the electronic drums. Now notice that there's the reverse snares in here. They are subtle, but they add a real cool bit of vibe in the track. Let's see how they sound together. And now removing the electronic drums. The only other thing to note with the electronic drums is that in the intro, I had this kind of heartbeat idea going. It just gives that intro part a bit of extra energy. And just so you know, all of these electronic drum sounds came from XLN Audio's XO. So that's drums. Moving right along, let's look at the drop. What I wanted to hear was some kind of winding down after the music had stopped and then a wind up to anticipate the main riff. This is what I landed on. To make this sound, there are 2 elements being drums and synths. For the drums, there is a kick, a reverbed kick, a reverse reverbed kick, and a reverse crash, which sound like this. The rest of the drop sounds like this, which is all from Serum. The first layer is a patch called Atmospheric Boom. Now I did mess around with this synth a bit because this boom was kind of huge the whole way through. As I said, I wanted something that winds down and then winds up. Now this is where I found a weakness with Serum 2, which is kind of funny because this video is about singing its praise. What I wanted to do with this patch was pretty much just turn the volume down in the middle and turn it back up. To me, it would be obvious to put a gain knob on the utility effect somewhere along here so that you can just simply turn it up or down. The other option would be to have the master volume automatable, but no matter what I tried, I couldn't find a workaround. Even the compressor that does have a gain knob, you can only turn the gain up, you can't turn it down, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, in the interest of learning this synth, I decided a convoluted workaround, which was to create 2 filters that started wide and then collapse in and expand again, which basically means that they allow all frequencies, then they deny most frequencies, and then allow them all again. And this is the end result. Now, without these filters, it sounds like this, which is not the sound that I wanted. And you may think that this doesn't sound like much, and that's okay. It's the sound that worked in my mix. The next sound is this, which is the Rise Sweep Digi preset. I did play around with some settings, but I didn't change that much. But I did automate the volume using Ableton's utility plugin because it's easier than trying to do it in Serum. The next 2 sounds come from the BA Disturbance patch. First is a kind of bass drop. The second is more of a riser. The reason why I did this was for cohesion. If I've got 6 different synths doing 6 different things, it can be confusing. It's often much easier to keep your sounds aligned like this, even if it's a bit less fun to create. So that's the drop. Once again, this is what the drop sounds like by itself. Next is the bass enhancement. Here's the bass. I think it's pretty obvious what that synth is doing. Now, I built this one by creating a super saw, which is multiple saw waves with lots of voices, and depending on the flavor you want, maybe a couple of different octaves. I find that super saws with low pass filters match really nicely with guitar and bass tones. So let's check out what this filter is doing against the guitar and bass. When I turned off that filter, it sounded fuller, it sounded cool, right? But The thing is, even though it sounds cool, it's now taking up too much space. If we play it along with everything else, have a listen. See how it's kind of just adding this noise up the top that it just sounds really digital and inorganic? I don't think that sounds great. But when we chuck that filter on and play it along with the track, right, it's playing along nicely with everything and not stepping on anyone's toes, but it's supporting everyone in the right way. So that's the bass and guitar synth. And now we've got the lead line, which, just like the last one, is another super saw, but with more of a plucky vibe. So let's hear that in solo. I also have this macro here tuned to distortion. So as the time goes on, it starts kind of a bit more subtle and a bit more quiet, and then... but at the end, it's kind of far more aggressive. And then the final element is that I've got some orchestral instruments that are enhancing this run as well. So now that you see how I've put everything together, let's have a quick listen to see how it all works in context. And here's the Jakety Jake Jake final take. This whole idea spawned off a random synth patch that sounded cool. As you can see, once I had an idea I enjoyed, all the extra steps to make it sound like a full production were quite simple extensions, expansions, and extrapolations of that initial idea. Everyone has the ability to do what I did, so stop overcomplicating what you write and start writing. For those of you who want to know more, check out this video on the 5 biggest songwriting mistakes. It's a simple and quick video that will help you avoid so many costly mistakes in your songwriting. Meanwhile, I'm going to go get a new mic stand.